The telegram crumpled in Clara Monroe's trembling hands as the last train whistle faded into the Wyoming dust. 3 days. She'd waited 3 days at this godforsaken station for a man who promised her a new life, a home, a future beyond the suffocating walls of the Boston orphanage she'd fled. The silver-toed boots he'd described in his letters, the ones that would carry her into her new life, never appeared. As the sun bled crimson across the endless prairie, Clara realized with crushing certainty she'd traded everything she'd ever known for a lie written on paper. But what she didn't know, couldn't know, was that a different pair of boots was already thundering toward her through the sage and dust, boots worn by a man who would change everything. Friends, settle in as I share with you this remarkable tale of abandonment, resilience, and unexpected love. And please, comment below which city you're watching from. I'd love to know how far Clara's story has traveled today. The depot at Clearwater Junction stood like a weathered sentinel against the endless Wyoming sky, its boards bleached bone-white by decades of unforgiving sun. Clara Monroe sat rigid on a wooden crate marked Dry Goods, St. Louis, her spine straight despite 3 days of waiting, her chin lifted with the kind of pride that poverty teaches you to wear like armor. The navy traveling dress she'd sewn by candlelight in Boston was now dulled with prairie dust, its careful stitches a testament to dreams that seemed increasingly foolish with each passing hour. "Miss, the evening stage already left," the station master, a wiry man named Hutchins, called out from the depot door. His voice carried that particular brand of pity reserved for abandoned women and injured animals. "Won't be another until Tuesday morning." Clara's fingers tightened on the leather valise in her lap. Everything she owned condensed into one bag small enough to carry, but large enough to hold hope. Inside, wrapped in her mother's threadbare shawl, lay the bundle of letters that had brought her 2,000 miles from everything familiar. Letters signed James Rourke in a confident hand, promising her respectability, partnership, and something she'd never dared dream of, a home of her own. "I'll wait," she said, her Boston accent sharp as winter ice against the lazy drawl of frontier conversation. "He said he'd come." Hutchins shifted uncomfortably, his boots scraping against the platform's boards. "Miss Monroe, been 3 days now. Maybe you ought to consider—" "What?" Clara turned to face him fully, and something in her gray eyes made him step back. "Consider what exactly, Mr. Hutchins? That I've been deceived? That I've traveled across this country on the promise of a man who couldn't even trouble himself to send word of delay? I'm well aware of my situation." The station master retreated into his office, leaving Clara alone with the gathering dusk. The platform stretched empty in both directions, railroad tracks disappearing into a horizon that seemed to mock her with its vastness. Back in Boston, she'd imagined Wyoming as a place of new beginnings, where a woman with calloused hands and no family name might build something worthwhile. The matrons at the orphanage had warned her about trusting correspondence courtships. But what choice did she have? 26 years old, aged out of the orphanage's charity, with skills limited to mending, cooking, and keeping accounts. Her options had been stark. Become a factory girl, a governess to bratty children, or take this wild chance on a rancher seeking a wife. The first letter had arrived 6 months ago, forwarded through the Matrimonial Times. James Rourke of Clearwater, Wyoming, sought a practical woman of good character, not afraid of hard work, to share in the building of a cattle ranch. No poetry, no false promises of luxury, just straightforward propositions of partnership. Clara had appreciated the honesty, or what she'd taken for honesty. Their correspondence had grown from tentative introductions to something deeper. James wrote about the ranch he was building from nothing, about Wyoming sunsets that painted the mountains purple, about the loneliness that echoed through empty rooms meant for family. Clara shared carefully edited stories of her past, the cholera that took her parents when she was 7, the years at St. Catherine's Orphanage where she'd learned that kindness was currency and self-reliance was survival. "You understand what it means to build something from nothing," James had written. "That's rarer than gold out here." Now those letters felt like weights in her bag, each promise a stone dragging her down. She'd spent her last dollar on the train ticket, sold the few pieces of jewelry her mother had left her, burned every bridge in Boston with a determination that now seemed like madness. The sun dropped lower, painting the depot in shades of amber and rust. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, the sound raising goosebumps along Clara's arms. She'd never heard one before coming west, and the wild loneliness of it seemed to echo everything hollow inside her chest. "You need to find somewhere for the night," Hutchins ventured again, peering out from his office. "There's a boarding house in town, Mrs. Garrett's place. She might—" "With what money, Mr. Hutchins?" Clara's laugh was brittle as autumn leaves. "I have exactly 17 cents to my name, which I doubt will secure me accommodation at Mrs. Garrett's or anywhere else." The sound of hoofbeats interrupted whatever response the station master might have offered. Clara's heart leaped traitorously. Even now, after 3 days, some foolish part of her expected James to appear with explanations and apologies. She stood, smoothing her skirts with hands that trembled slightly, and turned toward the sound. The rider who emerged from the dust was not what she'd imagined. Where James's letters had described himself as slight of build with prematurely gray hair, this man sat his horse like he'd been born to it, tall and broad-shouldered, dark hair curling beneath a worn Stetson. His clothes spoke of hard use, leather chaps scarred by brush and wire, a coat that had seen too many seasons, boots that had walked too many miles. But it was his face that made Clara's breath catch, not handsome in any conventional sense, but carved by wind and sun into something honest, with eyes the color of sage honey that seemed to take in everything at once. He dismounted in one fluid motion, and Clara noticed he favored his left leg slightly, an old injury perhaps. As he approached, she saw him take in her traveling dress, her valise, the defensive set of her shoulders. Something shifted in his expression, understanding maybe, or recognition of a different sort. "Miss Monroe?" His voice was deeper than she'd expected, roughened by trail dust. "Yes." She lifted her chin, ready for whatever blow was coming. "And you are?" "Miles Rourke." He removed his hat, revealing hair that needed cutting and a face that needed shaving. "James's cousin." The world seemed to tilt slightly. Clara gripped the handle of her valise tighter. "Is he— Has something happened?" Miles's jaw tightened, and he looked away toward the horizon before meeting her eyes again. "Ma'am, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know I didn't know about any of this until 2 days ago." "Just say it." Clara's voice came out steady, though her knees felt like water. "James took fever 3 weeks back. Doctor says it's his lungs, consumption most likely. He's bedridden at the ranch, has been since before you left Boston." Miles's hands worked the brim of his hat, the only sign of his discomfort. "He didn't want to send word, kept saying he'd be better by the time you arrived. Pride's always been his weakness." Clara sank back onto the crate, her legs finally giving way. Consumption. She'd seen enough of it in the orphanage to know what that meant. The slow wasting, the bloody coughs, the inevitable end. How long? Doctor can't say. Weeks, maybe months if he's lucky. Miles stepped closer but maintained a respectful distance. "Miss Monroe, I know this isn't what you expected." "Expected?" Clara's laugh bordered on hysterical. "Mr. Rourke, I sold everything I owned, traveled 2,000 miles, and waited 3 days on this platform for a dying man who couldn't even send a telegram. I'm somewhat beyond expectations at this point." Miles studied her for a long moment, and she saw something shift in his expression, respect maybe, for her refusal to dissolve into tears. "You've got grit. I'll give you that." "Grit doesn't pay for lodging, Mr. Rourke." No, ma'am, it doesn't." He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "Look, I know you don't know me from Adam, but I can't leave you here. The ranch, James's ranch, it's got room. You could stay until you figure out what to do next." "Stay with a dying man I've never met, and his cousin who's a complete stranger?" Clara stood, her body rigid with offended pride. "I may be desperate, Mr. Rourke, but I'm not without sense." "Then what will you do?" His question was gentle but pointed. "You said yourself you've got no money. There's no work in Clearwater for a woman that doesn't involve—" He paused delicately. "Compromises I don't think you're willing to make. The next train east doesn't come for 3 days, and even if it did, I have nowhere to go." The admission cost her. He could see it in the way her shoulders sagged slightly before straightening again. "Is that what you wanted to hear?" "What I want is to help." Miles ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "Look, James is my family, even if he's a prideful fool. He wrote about you, showed me your letters. You came here in good faith, and that means something. At least at the ranch, you'd have a roof, food, time to make a plan. And what would people say, Mr. Rourke? An unmarried woman staying with two bachelors? James won't be a bachelor much longer if the doctor's right, Miles said bluntly. As for what people say, pardon my language, ma'am, but to hell with them. You need help. I'm offering it. That's all this is. Clara studied him in the dying light. There was something in his face, not pity, which she couldn't have borne, but a kind of practical compassion that reminded her of the better nuns at St. Catherine's. The ones who understood that sometimes dignity was a luxury and survival came first. I won't be a charity case, she said finally. If I come, I work. Cooking, cleaning, tending to James. I earn my keep. Wouldn't expect anything else from a woman who waited 3 days on pure stubbornness. The corner of his mouth quirked up slightly. You have my word, Miss Monroe. You'll be safe, respected, and free to leave whenever you choose. Clara looked back at the empty platform, at the depot where she'd kept vigil for a future that was never coming. The coyote howled again, closer now, and she made her decision. I'll need to collect my trunk, she said, nodding toward a battered container near the depot wall. I had Mr. Hutchins store it when it became clear I'd be waiting. Miles moved to retrieve it without being asked, hefting the trunk with ease despite its obvious weight. Books? He asked, noting the strain. Some, and my mother's sewing machine. She dared him to comment on the impracticality of hauling a sewing machine across the country. Instead, he just nodded. Practical. Ranch life is hard on clothes. He secured the trunk to his horse with practiced efficiency, then turned to her. Can you ride? I've never been on a horse in my life. Then you'll ride with me. It's 8 miles to the ranch, and full dark's coming. He mounted first, then extended his hand to her. I'll need you to trust me, Miss Monroe, just for tonight. Clara looked at his outstretched hand, calloused, scarred, honest, and made what felt like the 100th leap of faith in her life. His grip was strong as he pulled her up, settling her sideways in front of him with her valise clutched in her lap. She tried not to notice the solid warmth of him at her back, the careful way he arranged his arms to guide the reins without crowding her. Thank you, she said quietly as they started forward. Don't thank me yet, Miles replied. You haven't seen the ranch. They rode in silence through the gathering dark, the horse's steady gait eating up the miles. Clara had never experienced darkness like this. Absolute, profound, broken only by stars that seemed close enough to touch. In Boston, there had always been gaslight, the glow from windows, the sense of civilization pressing close. Here, she might have been riding through the void itself if not for the warm, living presence of the horse beneath them and the man behind her. Tell me about James, she said finally, needing something to anchor her to reality. The truth, not what he wrote in letters. Miles was quiet for a moment. He's a dreamer, always has been. Sees the world as what it could be, not what it is. The ranch. He bought it with inheritance money, convinced he could make something of it. But ranching takes more than dreams. It takes money he doesn't have, knowledge he's too proud to admit he lacks, and a body strong enough for the work. And you? How did you come to be here? Came out to help him 2 years ago. Couldn't stand to see him fail. There was affection in his voice mixed with frustration. He's book smart, James is. Can quote poetry, discuss philosophy, write a letter that would make you believe in fairy tales. But ask him to brand a calf or mend a fence, and he's useless. Whereas you're the opposite. She felt rather than saw his shrug. Never had much use for books, but I know cattle, know the land, thought between the two of us we might make something work. But consumption doesn't care about plans. His voice was matter-of-fact, but she heard the grief beneath it. He started coughing blood a month ago. Hid it at first, stubborn fool. By the time I forced him to see the doctor, it was too late. They crested a rise, and Miles pointed to lights glowing in the distance. There's the ranch. Clara's first impression was of modest ambition defeated by reality. The main house was smaller than she'd imagined. 2 stories of wind-scoured wood that needed paint. A barn stood to the left, more solid-looking than the house, and she could make out other outbuildings. A chicken coop, what might be a smokehouse. It wasn't the prosperous spread James's letters had painted, but it was shelter. As they rode into the yard, A dog emerged from the barn, tail wagging. "That's Blue," Miles said. "Useless as a cattle dog, but good company." He dismounted first, then helped her down, his hands lingering at her waist just long enough to ensure she was steady. "I'll see to your trunk. The house is open. Go on in. James's room is upstairs, first door on the right, but he's likely sleeping. There's stew on the stove if you're hungry." Clara hesitated at the threshold. Through the windows, she could see a lamp burning, casting warm light on simple furnishings. This wasn't what she'd planned, wasn't what she'd dreamed during those long nights in Boston. But it was real, solid, present, and sometimes that had to be enough. She pushed open the door and stepped into her uncertain future. The interior of the house spoke of masculine habitation and benign neglect. The front room served multiple purposes: parlor, office, and apparently storage for various pieces of tack and equipment that had no business being indoors. A layer of dust covered most surfaces, though someone had made recent efforts at tidiness, evident in the swept floor and the dishes washed and stacked by the kitchen pump. The promised stew sat on a cast iron stove that dominated the kitchen area. Clara lifted the lid and sniffed. Venison, she thought, with potatoes and wild onions. Her stomach reminded her forcefully that she'd eaten nothing but crackers and anxiety for 3 days. She found a bowl and spoon, served herself, and ate standing up, too weary to search for wherever the table might be hiding under the collection of papers and ledgers. Miles entered as she was finishing, carrying her trunk with easy strength. "I'll put this in the spare room," he said. "It's not much, but the bed's sound and the roof doesn't leak." "Mr. Rourke," Clara set down her bowl, gathering her courage. "I need to see him. James, I need to understand what I'm dealing with." Miles studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me." The stairs creaked under their weight as they climbed. The upper floor was even more sparse than below, 3 doors off a narrow hallway, bare walls, a window at the end that looked out into darkness. Miles knocked softly on the first door, then pushed it open. The smell hit her first: sickness, medicine, and the peculiar sweetness of consumption that she remembered from the orphanage infirmary. James Rourke lay propped on pillows, his face gaunt and flushed with fever. He was indeed slight of build, as his letters had claimed, with hair that might have been prematurely gray or might have been turned so by illness. His breathing was shallow, labored, and a blood-stained handkerchief lay crumpled on the nightstand. "He has good days and bad days," Miles said quietly. Today was bad. Clara approached the bed, studying the man she'd traveled so far to marry. Even in illness, she could see traces of what might have been: intelligent features, long fingers that suggested artistic inclinations, a face that would have been pleasant if not handsome. But consumption had carved him down to essentials, leaving only the architecture of bones and the terrible brightness of fever. Has he had laudanum? This morning. He refuses it mostly, says it clouds his mind. Miles moved to adjust the blankets unnecessarily. "You wanted to be clear-headed when you arrived." "For all the good that did." Clara touched James's forehead briefly, burning hot, as she'd expected. "How long since he's eaten?" "Yesterday, maybe. He keeps down broth sometimes." She turned to face Miles fully. "Mr. Rourke, I'll be plain. I've seen consumption before. Your cousin has weeks at most, possibly days if pneumonia sets in. He needs constant care, medication when he'll take it, and someone needs to prepare for the end. Can you handle that truth?" Miles's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I've known. Just haven't wanted to admit it." "Then here's what we'll do." Clara moved away from the bed, her mind shifting into the practical mode that had seen her through 20 years at St. Catherine's. "I'll take nights with him. I'm used to little sleep. You handle the ranch during the day. We'll spell each other as needed. In exchange, I'll need room and board until I can figure out my next step. Agreed?" "You'd do that? Care for a stranger?" "He's not a stranger. We corresponded for 6 months. I know his favorite poems, his dreams for this ranch, his fear of dying unmourned." She looked back at James's wasted form. "He may not be the man I came to marry, but I came here to be needed. This isn't what I expected, but it's what's in front of me." Miles was quiet for a long moment. "You really did read those letters?" "Every word, multiple times." She managed a wry smile. "I may be a fool, Mr. Rourke, but I'm a thorough fool." Something shifted in his expression, a deepening of that respect she'd glimpsed at the depot. The spare room is across the hall. There's water in the pitcher, and I'll bring up fresh linens. You should rest. Tomorrow will come soon enough. Clara nodded, suddenly feeling the weight of the past 3 days, the journey, the collapse of her plans. Mr. Rourke, Miles, why did you really come for me? You could have sent a telegram, saved yourself the trouble. He paused at the doorway, considering. Because James asked me to. Because a woman who'd traveled 2,000 miles on a promise deserved better than a telegram, and because... He stopped, shook his head. Get some rest, Miss Monroe. We can sort the rest in daylight. After he left, Clara stood alone in the sick room, listening to James's labored breathing. Through the window, she could see stars scattered like spilled salt across the black canvas of sky. Somewhere out there was the life she'd imagined, the partnership, the home, the future built on mutual effort and respect. That life was as dead as James would soon be. But standing there, exhausted and abandoned and strangely calm, Clara felt something else stirring. Not hope exactly, but possibility. She'd come west to build something from nothing. Perhaps she still could, just not in the way she'd planned. She checked James once more. His fever was stable, his breathing no worse. Then crossed to the spare room Miles had indicated. It was exactly as promised, sparse but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single chair. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed, like a reminder of the life she'd packed away. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself a moment of complete honesty. She was alone, penniless, thousands of miles from anything familiar, in a house with a dying man and his cousin who might be trustworthy or might not. Any sensible woman would be terrified. Instead, she felt oddly free. For the first time in her life, she had no one's expectations to meet but her own. No matrons watching her every move, no factory foreman counting her stitches, no proper Boston society to judge her worth. There was something liberating in having nothing left to lose. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Miles stood in the doorway with an armload of quilts and a pillow. Thought you might need these. Gets cold at night, even in summer. Thank you. She accepted the linens, noticing they smelled of sage and sun. Miles? I can call you Miles? Seems foolish to stand on ceremony, given the circumstances. Then you should call me Clara. She set the quilts on the bed. I need to know, what happens when James dies? To the ranch, I mean. To you. Miles leaned against the doorframe, his expression thoughtful. Ranch goes to his sister in California. She'll sell it, no doubt. As for me, he shrugged. There's always work for a man who knows cattle. I'll drift, find something else. And you're at peace with that? Putting 2 years into building something just to walk away? Wasn't my dream to begin with. I came to help James, that's all. But something in his voice suggested it wasn't quite that simple. I saw the ledgers downstairs, Clara said carefully. The ranch is struggling. That's a polite way of putting it. We're about 2 months from bankruptcy, truth be told. James spent too much on things that didn't matter, not enough on things that did. Bought books on agricultural theory instead of winter feed. Ordered fancy furniture from Denver that we had to sell for a fraction of its cost. Miles's frustration was evident. He meant well, but meaning well doesn't keep cattle alive through a Wyoming winter. Could it be saved? The ranch? With money, knowledge, and pure grit? Maybe, but that's not what we have. Clara stood, moving to the window to look out at the darkened land. What do you have? 100 head of cattle, mixed quality, decent grazing land with water rights, that's the real value. A barn that won't fall down for another few winters, and about 6 weeks before the bank comes calling. And if someone wanted to try, to save it? She felt him move closer, though he maintained proper distance. Clara, you just got here. You don't know what you're suggesting. Ranch life. It's brutal. It's isolation and backbreaking work and watching everything you build get destroyed by weather or disease or bad luck. It's not for a properly bred lady? She turned to face him, chin lifted. Mr. Rourke, Miles, I've been scrubbing floors since I was 7 years old. I've watched children die of preventable diseases because there wasn't money for medicine. I've been told every day of my life what I can't do, where I can't go, what I can't be because I'm an orphan, because I'm a woman, because I'm nobody from nowhere. Don't presume to tell me what's too hard. They stood facing each other in the lamplight. and Clara saw something spark in his eyes, surprise, admiration, and something else she couldn't quite name. "You're serious," he said finally. "You're actually considering staying." "I'm considering options, that's all." She turned back to the window. "For now, we focus on James. Everything else can wait." Miles was quiet for a long moment. "You know, you're nothing like your letters suggested." "Oh?" She kept her voice neutral. "How did my letters suggest I was?" "Proper, delicate, in need of protection." She heard amusement in his voice. "James read them aloud sometimes. He was convinced he was rescuing you. And instead? Instead, you might be the one doing the rescuing." He moved toward the door. "Get some rest, Clara. Dawn comes early here." After he left, Clara unpacked her few belongings: 2 spare dresses, undergarments, her mother's shawl, the books she couldn't bear to leave behind, and the packet of letters from James. She held the letters for a moment, considering throwing them in the stove. But sentiment or practicality stayed her hand. They were evidence of something, even if she wasn't sure what anymore. She changed into her nightgown, a plain cotton thing that had seen too many washings, and lay down on the narrow bed. Through the thin walls, she could hear James's labored breathing from one side, Miles moving around downstairs on the other. The house settled around her with creaks and sighs, like an old woman getting comfortable. Clara closed her eyes and tried to imagine what her life might look like in 6 weeks, in 6 months. Every scenario seemed impossible, improbable. But then, so had this one. And yet here she was. A cough from James's room, harsh, wet, painful sounding, pulled her from near sleep. She rose, wrapped her mother's shawl around her shoulders, and padded barefoot across the hall. James was awake, his eyes bright with fever, struggling to breathe through the fluid in his lungs. "Easy," she said, moving to prop him higher on the pillows. "Don't fight it. Small breaths." His eyes focused on her with difficulty. You're her. Clara." "Yes." She found a clean cloth, dampened it from the pitcher, and wiped the sweat from his face. "Rest now. We can talk later." "I'm sorry," he wheezed. "The letters, I wanted, I know." And surprisingly, she found she did know. She'd read between the lines of his correspondence, sensed the desperation beneath the promises. You wanted to build something beautiful. There's no shame in that. "Miles, he thinks I'm a fool. Miles loves you enough to be frustrated by you. That's not the same as thinking you're a fool." James managed a weak smile. "You're different than I imagined." "So are you." She adjusted his blankets. "Now rest. Save your strength. Will you stay?" The question was barely a whisper. Not as my wife, but will you stay?" Clara looked at this dying stranger who had inadvertently changed the entire course of her life. "For now," she said. "We'll take it day by day." He closed his eyes, seemingly satisfied. Clara sat with him until his breathing evened out into sleep, then returned to her room, but sleep eluded her. Instead, she stood at the window, watching the stars wheel overhead, and tried to make sense of the strange turn her life had taken. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed midnight. Her first day in Wyoming was ending, though it felt like a lifetime had passed since she'd sat on that crate at the depot. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, learning the rhythms of the ranch, establishing her place in this unusual household, caring for a dying man she'd never truly know. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt something like purpose. Not the grand purpose she'd imagined, wife, partner, builder of dynasties. Something smaller but more real, being needed, being useful, being present for whatever came next. The coyote howled again in the distance, but it didn't sound lonely anymore. It sounded like wildness calling to wildness, like the land itself acknowledging her arrival. Clara pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders and finally lay down to sleep. Tomorrow, she thought, she would begin the work of building something from nothing, just not the something she'd expected. Dawn came too soon, announced by a rooster that seemed to be competing with Blue's barking for who could make the most noise. Clara woke disoriented, the unfamiliar room coming into focus slowly. Through the thin walls, she could hear movement. Miles was already up, the sound of boots on wooden floors unmistakable. She dressed quickly in her simplest dress, a brown calico that had already seen better days, and pinned her hair into a practical bun. No point in pretending to be anything other than what she was. A woman prepared to work. Downstairs, she found Miles at the stove, frying eggs and what looked like salt pork. He glanced up at her entrance, and she caught a flicker of surprise in his expression. "Expected you to sleep later," he said. "Most city folks take time to adjust." "Most city folks haven't spent 20 years rising at 5 for morning prayers." She moved to the stove. "Let me. You must have work outside." "I can manage." "I'm sure you can, but we had an agreement. I earn my keep." She gently but firmly took the spatula from his hand. "How does James take his breakfast when he eats?" "Broth, mostly. Sometimes porridge if he can keep it down." Miles stepped back, seemingly unsure what to do with his hands now that they weren't occupied. "There's oats in the pantry, salt pork in the smokehouse, and the hens might have laid if the coyotes didn't get them first." "I'll manage." She expertly flipped the eggs. "What time do you usually check the cattle?" "First light. Should have been out there an hour ago, but—" He trailed off. "But you were waiting to see if I'd bolt in the night?" A slight smile tugged at his mouth. The thought crossed my mind. "I don't bolt, Mr. Rourke. I might make questionable decisions, but I see them through." She plated the eggs and pork, setting them on the table. "Eat. Then show me what needs doing around here." He sat, but his eyes stayed on her as she moved efficiently around the kitchen, taking inventory. The pantry was better stocked than she'd expected. Flour, sugar, salt, beans, preserved goods. Either Miles was a better planner than his cousin, or someone in town had extended credit. "There's coffee," he said between bites. "If you want it." Clara found the pot, still warm from earlier, and poured 2 cups. The coffee was strong enough to stand a spoon in, but she'd had worse. She sat across from him, the table between them like a negotiation. "Tell me the truth about the ranch's finances," she said. "I saw the ledgers, but numbers don't tell the whole story." Miles set down his fork. "Why do you need to know?" "Because I'm practical, and I don't like surprises." She sipped her coffee. "And because if I'm going to be here when the bank comes calling, I'd rather know what to expect." He studied her for a long moment, then seemed to make a decision. "We owe $2,000. Payment was due last month, but the banker, Mr. Holbrook, gave us an extension out of respect for James's father. That extension ends in 6 weeks. And the ranch's value. Land and water rights are worth maybe $3,000 if we could find a buyer. Cattle might bring $500 if we drove them to market, but that takes time and men we don't have. The house and outbuildings," he shrugged. "Maybe another $500 to the right person." Clara did quick calculations. "So you have assets worth more than the debt, but no liquidity. You understand finance?" He seemed genuinely surprised. "I kept the books at St. Catherine's for 5 years. The Mother Superior thought it was good training for a woman who'd need to manage a household." She set down her cup. "Have you talked to Holbrook about restructuring the loan?" James was supposed to handle that. He had grand plans to present showing how the ranch would be profitable within 2 years. Miles's expression was grim. "Those plans are upstairs in his room, covered in blood from his last coughing fit." "And you? Could you present them?" "I'm a cowhand, Clara. I can read and write, but barely. Numbers swim on the page for me. James was the educated one." Clara stood, decision made. "After I see to James, I want to look at those plans. And the ledgers, properly this time. If there's a way to save this place—" "Why?" Miles interrupted. "Why do you care? This isn't your problem." She considered how to answer. The truth was complicated, part pride, part desperation, part something else she couldn't name. "Because I came here to build something, because I have nowhere else to go, and because—" She met his eyes directly. "Because I think you love this place more than you admit, and I think James loved it too, in his way. Seems a shame to let it die with him." Miles was quiet for a moment. His coffee cup turned between his hands. "You're taking on more than you know. Story of my life. She moved toward the stairs. "I'll see to James, then I want you to show me the ranch. All of it. If I'm going to fight for this place, I need to know what I'm fighting for." She left him sitting at the table and climbed the stairs to James's room. Her patient was awake, struggling to sit up, his face flushed with fever and effort. "Easy," she said, moving to help him. "Let me." Up close in daylight, she could see more clearly what the disease had done to him. His eyes were intelligent despite the fever, a warm brown that might have been kind in better circumstances. His hands, when she took them to check his pulse, were soft, a gentleman's hands, unused to physical labor. "You stayed," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I said I would." She poured water from the pitcher, helped him drink. "How do you feel?" "Like I'm dying." The frankness would have been shocking from anyone else, but something in his tone made it simply factual. "Which I am, so I suppose that's appropriate." "Yes," Clara agreed, seeing no point in false comfort. "You are. Does that frighten you?" He seemed surprised by her directness. "Yes. No, both." He struggled to find words between labored breaths. "I'm afraid of leaving things undone. The ranch, Miles told me about the bank. Miles thinks I'm a fool for trying to save it." "Are you?" James managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. Clara helped him through it, noting the blood on the handkerchief. "Not long now." "Probably," he said when he could speak again. "But it was going to be magnificent, Clara. I had such plans. Blooded cattle from Scotland, irrigation systems to make the desert bloom, a house grand enough for—" He stopped, looking at her with sudden clarity. "For a wife who deserved better than this." "Tell me about the plans," Claire said, settling into the chair beside his bed. "All of them. Help me understand your vision." For the next hour, between coughing fits and struggles for breath, James painted a picture of the ranch that existed in his imagination. His ideas were grand, some brilliant, some utterly impractical. But listening to him, Clara began to understand both brothers better. James was the dreamer who saw potential in everything, Miles the realist who kept things running day to day. Neither complete without the other. "The papers," James said finally, exhausted from talking. "In the desk. Everything's there. The breeding records, the water surveys, the projections for profit." He gripped her hand with surprising strength. "Miles can't read them. Won't admit it, but he can't. Pride runs in the family." "I'll read them," Clara promised. "But James, you need to prepare." "For death?" He smiled sadly. "I've been preparing since the first time I coughed blood. There's a will in the desk, too. Everything to my sister, as Miles probably told you. But Clara—" His grip tightened. "If you could save it somehow, this place, for Miles. He won't admit it, but he loves this land. First place he's ever belonged." "I'll try," she said, though she had no idea how she could make such a promise. James closed his eyes, spent. Clara sat with him until he slept, then went to the desk he'd indicated. It was a beautiful piece, wildly impractical for a ranch house, cherry wood with brass fittings, shipped from somewhere back east at God's knew what cost. Inside, she found exactly what James had promised: detailed plans, surveys, breeding records, correspondence with agricultural colleges, and projections that showed the ranch turning a significant profit within 2 years. The problem was immediately apparent. James's projections assumed perfect conditions: no harsh winters, no disease, no loss of cattle, no fluctuation in beef prices. He'd built a castle in the air without foundations, but buried in his impractical dreams were kernels of good ideas. The water rights were more valuable than he'd realized. The breeding program, scaled down, might actually work. And there was correspondence with a buyer in Chicago interested in direct supply, cutting out the middlemen who ate most of the profits. "Find anything useful?" Miles's voice from the doorway made her jump. "Maybe." She turned to face him. "Your cousin had good instincts buried under grand ambitions. This Chicago buyer, is that connection still viable?" "Could be. Haven't had cattle worth selling to make it matter." He entered the room, careful not to disturb James. "You really think there's a chance?" "I think there's enough of a chance to try." She gathered the papers. "Show me the ranch. I need to see what we're working with." The tour that followed was an education in the harsh realities of frontier ranching. The 100 head of cattle James had mentioned were scattered across rangeland that stretched for miles, mixed breed animals of varying quality. The barn, while solid, needed repairs before winter. The chicken coop had indeed been raided by coyotes, leaving only a few traumatized hens. The irrigation system James had started was a half-finished folly, pipes laid but no water flowing. But Clara also saw potential. The land itself was good, grass-rich despite the dry summer, with a creek running through that guaranteed water even in drought. The cattle, while not the blooded stock James had dreamed of, were sturdy enough. And Miles himself was a resource James hadn't properly valued. His knowledge of the land, his understanding of cattle, his sheer physical capability. "What would it take?" she asked as they stood on a rise overlooking the property. "To make this profitable. Not James's version of profitable, but actually sustainable." Miles considered, his eyes scanning the land with the assessment of someone who knew every acre. "Better bulls for breeding. Maybe 3 good ones instead of the dozen James wanted. Fix the barn before winter or we'll lose calves. Hire hands for the spring drive. Can't do it alone. And prayer for good weather and no disease." "How much?" "Maybe $500 to do it right. $300 to scrape by." Clara did calculations in her head. "And if we had 6 weeks to show the banker progress? Then we'd need a miracle." But something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely without hope. They rode back to the house in companionable silence, Clara having graduated to her own horse, a gentle mare that Miles assured her was too lazy to do anything dangerous. She was surprised to find she enjoyed it, the rhythm of the ride, the vast openness around them. "You sit a horse better than you claimed," Miles observed. "I'm a quick study when I need to be." She adjusted her posture as he'd shown her. "Miles, what James said about you not reading," his jaw tightened. "Leave it be." "I could teach you. It's not—" "I said leave it." His voice was sharp enough to cut, then softer. "Please." Clara recognized the tone of pride mixed with shame. She'd heard it often enough at the orphanage. "All right, but if you change your mind—" "I won't." They finished the ride in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Clara was learning that Miles was a man of silences, not all of them awkward. There was something restful about someone who didn't feel the need to fill every moment with words. Back at the house, she found James worse. His fever had spiked, and his breathing was labored even with extra pillows. She spent the rest of the day nursing him, coaxing broth into him, cooling his fever with wet cloths, reading to him from one of his books of poetry when he was lucid enough to listen. Miles appeared periodically, checking on his cousin, bringing Clara food she forgot to eat, taking over so she could rest. They developed a rhythm without discussing it, an easy partnership born of necessity. That evening, as Clara sat with the ledgers spread before her on the kitchen table, Miles joined her with his own cup of coffee. "Find anything?" "Your cousin was terrible at recording expenses, but meticulous about breeding records." She showed him a page covered in James's careful handwriting. He tracked every calf born, every bloodline, every sale. "This is valuable information if we could find the right buyer." "Most buyers don't care about bloodlines for range cattle." "But that Chicago connection might. If we could guarantee quality, consistency." She paused, struck by a thought. "Miles, how many calves are you expecting this year?" "Maybe 30, if we're lucky." "And if those calves could be sold in advance, on contract, for a premium because of their documented bloodlines?" "You're thinking like James now. Grand plans." "No," Clara said firmly. "I'm thinking like someone who kept an orphanage running on donations and prayer. You work with what you have, not what you wish you had." She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and began sketching out a plan. Not James's grand vision, but something smaller, more achievable. Use the breeding records to market directly to the Chicago buyer. Focus on quality over quantity. Fix only what needed fixing before winter. Negotiate with the bank for a partial payment and extended terms. "This could work," she said finally, looking up to find Miles watching her intently. "It's not certain, but it could work." "You do all this for a ranch that isn't yours? For people you just met?" Clara set down her pen, considering her answer. 20 years ago, a nun named Sister Catherine found me crying in the chapel at the orphanage. I'd just been told I was too old for adoption, that I'd age out and have to make my own way. She could have offered comfort and moved on. Instead, she taught me to read, to figure, to fight for myself. She changed my entire life with that choice. And And sometimes we help because we can, because it's needed, because we're there. She met his eyes. Is that so hard to understand? No, Miles said quietly. Just rare. They worked together until late, Clara explaining the figures, Miles providing practical knowledge about the ranch's operations. By the time they finished, they had something resembling a viable plan. Not perfect, not certain, but possible. I'll ride to town tomorrow, Miles said. Talk to Holbrook, see if he'll listen. Take the projections, Clara said. And Miles, let me go with you. I can explain the numbers. He shook his head. Town's already talking about you being here. Showing up together would make it worse. Let them talk. Easy for you to say. You don't have to live with these people after... He stopped abruptly. After James dies and I leave, Clara finished. Is that what you were going to say? Wasn't going to say anything. He stood, suddenly distant. Thank you for the help with the papers. I'll manage Holbrook. He left before she could respond, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. Clara sat alone in the kitchen, surrounded by plans and projections, and wondered if she was fooling herself thinking she could make a difference here. A sound from upstairs, James coughing, harsh and wet, pulled her from her thoughts. She climbed the stairs and found him awake, struggling for breath. The end was coming faster than she'd expected. Can't, he gasped. Can't breathe. She propped him higher, but it didn't help. His lungs were filling, drowning him from the inside. Miles, she called. He appeared immediately, taking in the situation with one glance. Should I get the doctor? No time, Clara said. Help me get him to the chair. Sometimes sitting full upright helps. Together they moved James to the room's single chair. It helped, marginally, but Clara could see the truth in his eyes. He knew, as she did, that this was the beginning of the end. The ranch, James wheezed, gripping Miles's hand. Promise me. Try to save it. James, promise me. Miles's jaw clenched, but he nodded. I promise. James turned to Clara. You didn't get your wedding. No, she agreed, but I got something else. Understanding, maybe. He smiled, a ghost of expression on his wasted face. Would have been. A good wife. And you would have tried to be a good husband. That counts for something. They sat with him through the night, taking turns holding his hand, helping him breathe, offering what comfort they could. As dawn approached, his breathing grew shallower, the spaces between breaths longer. Not alone, he whispered, looking between them. Didn't die alone. No, Miles said, his voice rough. Not alone. James Rourke died as the sun rose, painting the mountains purple just as he'd described in his letters. Clara closed his eyes while Miles stood frozen, grief and relief warring on his face. He's at peace now, she said gently. Is he? Miles's voice was bitter. He died with nothing accomplished, dreams unfulfilled, the ranch about to be lost. How is that peace? He died knowing he was loved, knowing someone would try to save what he'd built. That's more than many get. Miles turned away, his shoulders rigid. I need to see to the livestock. He left, and Clara was alone with the shell of the man she'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry. She pulled the sheet over his face and allowed herself a moment of grief. Not for James exactly, but for possibilities lost, for dreams that would never be. Then, because there was work to do, she went downstairs and began preparing for what came next. The body would need tending, the funeral arranged, the ranch saved or lost. But first, she'd make breakfast. Even grief needed to eat. Miles returned at midday, hollow-eyed but composed. I'll ride to town, he said. Tell the undertaker. Tell Holbrook. I'm coming with you. Clara, I'm coming with you, she repeated. James is gone. The propriety of me being here unchaperoned is already compromised. I might as well be hanged for a sheep as a lamb. He didn't argue further. They rode to town in silence, Clara on the gentle mare, Miles straight-backed on his stallion. The town of Clearwater sprawled along the main road like a question mark, buildings scattered without apparent plan. The largest structure was the mercantile, followed by the bank, the saloon, and a collection of other businesses that served the scattered ranches of the valley. Their arrival caused a stir. Clara could feel eyes on them from windows and doorways. A woman alone with a man not her husband, dressed in travel-worn clothes, her very presence a scandal. At the undertaker's, Miles handled the arrangements with minimal words. At the bank, he asked to see Mr. Holbrook privately, but the banker's eyes found Clara immediately. "This the bride?" Holbrook asked. He was a thin man with calculating eyes behind wire spectacles. "Miss Monroe," Miles said stiffly. "She's been helping with the books." "Has she now?" Holbrook's tone was suggestive enough to make Miles's hands clench. "Well, come in then, both of you." The banker's office was ostentatiously decorated, designed to impress and intimidate. Clara had seen its like before when the orphanage sought loans. "I'm sorry about James," Holbrook said, not sounding sorry at all. "But business is business. The payment—" "We have a proposal," Clara interrupted, pulling out the papers she'd prepared. "A restructuring that would benefit both the bank and the ranch." Holbrook's eyebrows rose. "Do you now? And what standing do you have to negotiate, Miss Monroe?" "The standing of someone who understands numbers, Mr. Holbrook. Would you like to see the projections, or would you prefer to foreclose on a property that will take you years to sell?" For the next hour, Clara presented her case. The documented bloodlines that could command premium prices. The Chicago buyer willing to contract in advance. The improvements that could be made with minimal investment. Holbrook listened, his expression giving nothing away. "Interesting," he said finally, "but I'd need collateral beyond just the ranch." "What kind of collateral?" Miles asked. Holbrook's eyes moved to Clara. "Perhaps Miss Monroe would consider co-signing? I understand she has connections back east." The implication was clear and insulting. Clara stood. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Holbrook. We'll find another solution." "I doubt that," Holbrook said. 6 weeks, Mr. Rourke. Full payment or foreclosure." Outside the bank, Miles's fury was palpable. That snake. He was suggesting— I know what he was suggesting. Clara kept her voice calm, though anger burned in her chest. "We'll find another way." "There is no other way. No other bank within 100 miles. No one else with that kind of money except—" He stopped abruptly. "Except?" "Nothing. There's no one." But Clara heard the lie in his voice. She filed it away for later consideration. For now they had a funeral to prepare. The service was held 2 days later, attended by a handful of ranchers who'd known James's father, the minister, and surprisingly several women from town. Clara stood with Miles at the graveside, aware of the whispers, the speculation. The minister spoke of resurrection and eternal life. But Clara watched Miles, saw how he stood rigid as stone, grief locked behind walls of masculine pride. "He was a dreamer," one of the ranchers said after, approaching Miles. "Like his father. Not always practical, but the world needs dreamers." "The world needs ranchers who can pay their debts," another said, less kindly. "Heard Holbrook's calling in the note." "Heard you got yourself a housekeeper," a third added, eyes sliding to Clara with obvious insinuation. Miles's fist connected with the man's jaw before Clara could intervene. The rancher went down hard, and suddenly everyone was shouting, some pulling Miles back, others helping the fallen man up. "Enough!" Clara's voice cut through the chaos. "You're at a funeral. Have you no decency?" The men fell silent, shamed or surprised by her vehemence. The rancher Miles had hit spat blood, glared, but said nothing more. The crowd dispersed quickly after that, leaving Clara and Miles alone by the fresh grave. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. "He insulted you." "I've been insulted before. I'll survive it." "You shouldn't have to." He turned to her, something fierce in his eyes. "You came here in good faith. You've done nothing but help. You don't deserve their filth." "What I deserve and what I get rarely align," Clara said. "Come, we have work to do." But Miles caught her arm gently. "Clara, you should go. Take the next train east. I'll give you money for the ticket." "With what money?" "I'll sell something. My horse, my saddle." "You shouldn't stay here." "Why?" She faced him fully. "Because of gossip? Because it's hard? I told you, Miles. I don't run." "This isn't your fight." "Isn't it?" She pulled free from his grip. "I came here to build something. James is gone, but the land remains, the opportunity remains, and you—" She stopped, uncertain how to finish. What about me? You need help, and I need purpose. Seems like a fair trade. They stood there in the cemetery, the wind whipping around them, and Clara felt something shift between them. Not romance, not yet, but possibility. Understanding. A recognition of kindred spirits who'd learned to survive by being stronger than circumstances allowed. All right, Miles said finally. We try. 6 weeks to save the ranch. 5 weeks and 4 days, Clara corrected. We've already lost time. They rode home, and when had she started thinking of it as home? In companionable silence. That evening, as they sat at the kitchen table with the ledgers between them, Miles asked, "What do you know about cattle drives?" "Nothing. Why?" "Because we need money fast, and the only thing we have to sell is cattle. There's a market in Denver that pays better than local. If I could get even half the herd there." "Can you do it alone?" "No. Need at least 3 men for a drive that size, and I can't afford to hire anyone." Clara considered. "What about the other ranchers? Would any help?" "Maybe. Thompson owes me a favor. Jackson might help for a share of profits." Miles rubbed his face tiredly. "It's a long shot." "Then we take it. You arrange the drive. I'll handle things here. You can't run a ranch alone." "I won't be running it. I'll be maintaining it. There's a difference." She pulled the ledgers toward her. "And I'll keep working on Holbrook. There has to be something that would change his mind." Miles stood to leave, then paused. "Clara, what you said to James about understanding, what did you mean?" She considered her words carefully. "I think I understand what it means to want something so badly you can't see straight, to build dreams bigger than reality can support, to need to matter, to leave some mark that says you existed." She met his eyes. "I think you understand that too, even if you won't admit it." He was quiet for a long moment. "Good night, Clara." After he left, she sat alone in the kitchen, planning. 5 weeks and 4 days to save a ranch that wasn't hers, for a man who wouldn't admit he cared, in a town that thought she was a fallen woman. She'd faced worse odds. But first, she needed to understand what Miles had been about to say at the bank. Who else had money in Clearwater, and why had he stopped himself from saying it? Tomorrow, she decided, she'd go to town alone. Ask questions. Learn what Miles wouldn't tell her. Because saving the ranch would take more than good intentions and hard work. It would take knowing all the players in the game. Outside, a coyote howled, and this time Clara smiled. Wildness calling to wildness. She was starting to understand what that meant. The morning after her resolution, Clara rose before dawn and saddled the gentle mare with movements that were becoming familiar. Miles had already left to speak with Thompson about the cattle drive, giving her the opportunity she needed. She wore her best remaining dress, a dark blue cotton that had survived the journey relatively unscathed, and pinned her hair in a style that suggested respectability despite her circumstances. The ride to town felt different alone. Every shadow could hide danger. Every sound made her heart race. But Clara had learned long ago that fear was just another obstacle to overcome. She kept her back straight and her eyes forward, projecting confidence she didn't entirely feel. Clearwater was quieter in the early morning, most of the businesses still closed, but the mercantile showed signs of life, lamplight glowing through the windows. Clara tied the mare to the post and entered, a small bell announcing her arrival. The proprietress, a stern-faced woman named Mrs. Garrett, who also ran the boarding house, looked up from her inventory with barely concealed curiosity. "Miss Monroe, heard you were staying out at the Rourke place." "Yes," Clara said simply, refusing to elaborate or defend. "I need supplies. Can you put them on the ranch account?" Mrs. Garrett's expression tightened. "That account's already stretched thin. Mr. Holbrook's been making his opinions known about extending credit to failing operations." "The ranch isn't failing, it's struggling. There's a difference." Clara moved through the store, selecting basic necessities. "But I didn't come here to discuss credit. I can pay cash for today's purchases." She placed her last 17 cents on the counter, knowing it would barely cover what she'd selected. Mrs. Garrett counted the coins with deliberate slowness. "This won't cover half of what you've picked out." "Then I'll take what it will cover." Clara began sorting through her selections, keeping only the most essential items. Salt, flour, a small amount of sugar. Everything else went back. You know, Mrs. Garrett said, her tone deceptively casual, there are ways a woman in your position could earn money quickly. Clara's hands stilled. And what position would that be, Mrs. Garrett? Unmarried, unchaperoned, living with a man who isn't your husband. The whole town's talking. Let them talk, Clara resumed her sorting. Their gossip doesn't change my circumstances. No, but it could. Mrs. Garrett leaned closer, her voice dropping. Mr. Holbrook has been known to be generous to women who show him appropriate gratitude. The implication was crystal clear. Clara felt rage rise in her throat but swallowed it down. Thank you for the information, Mrs. Garrett. I'll take my purchases now. There's another option, the older woman continued, seemingly unbothered by Clara's cold tone. The Garrison Ranch. Old man Garrison's been looking for a wife for his son. They've got money, lots of it. Could solve all your problems, and the Rourke ranches, too. This was new information. Clara kept her expression neutral. I wasn't aware the Garrisons had that kind of wealth. Oh yes, cattle, mining interests, even some railroad shares from what I hear. Of course, young Tom Garrison is, well, he's not much to look at, and there have been stories about his temper, but beggars can't be choosers, can they? Clara collected her meager purchases. Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Garrett, but I'm not begging. Good day. She left before the woman could respond, but the information churned in her mind. The Garrisons had money, enough to save the ranch, potentially. But at what cost? Her next stop was the telegraph office. She used her last cents to send a carefully worded message to Sister Catherine at the orphanage, inquiring about any possible assistance or connections. It was a long shot, but she'd learned to explore every option. The telegraph operator, a young man with nervous eyes, handed her the receipt. Expecting a reply, Miss Monroe? Perhaps. If one comes, could you hold it for me? Sure thing, though, he glanced around nervously. Might be better if Mr. Rourke picked it up. People are watching you pretty close. Why? Clara asked directly. What is everyone so fascinated by? The young man flushed. Well, it's just, we don't get many mail-order brides here, and with Mr. James dying so quick and you staying on, people have ideas. What kind of ideas? The kind that aren't suitable for mixed company, miss. He wouldn't meet her eyes. But if you don't mind me saying, you might want to be careful. Some folks are taking bets on how long before you and Miles, well, before you make arrangements. Clara left the telegraph office with her small purchases and a head full of troubling information. The town had already condemned her, cast her in a role she hadn't chosen. But more importantly, there were financial resources she hadn't known about. The Garrisons could be the key to everything. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the rider approaching until he was nearly upon her, Tom Garrison himself, as if her thoughts had summoned him. He was indeed not much to look at. Thin where Miles was strong, pale where Miles was sun-weathered, with close-set eyes that reminded Clara of a ferret. Miss Monroe, he touched his hat brim. Heard you were in town. Mr. Garrison. She kept her voice neutral, polite. Sorry about James. He was an odd duck, but didn't deserve that kind of end. Tom dismounted, standing too close for propriety. Clara could smell whiskey on his breath despite the early hour. Also heard you're in something of a predicament. I'm managing, thank you. Are you? His smile was unpleasant. Because from where I'm standing, you're a woman alone with no money, no prospects, and a reputation that's getting worse by the day. Seems to me you could use a friend. I have friends? Miles Rourke? Tom laughed. He's as broke as you are. Maybe broker, once Holbrook forecloses. But my family, we've got resources. We could help. At what price, Mr. Garrison? His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. I'm sure we could work out something mutually beneficial. My father's been after me to marry, settle down. You're not exactly what he had in mind, but you're pretty enough, and beggars can't be choosers. The echo of Mrs. Garrett's words wasn't lost on Clara. I'm not begging, Mr. Garrison. Not yet. He moved closer, and Clara stepped back, her hand instinctively going to the small knife she'd started carrying in her pocket. But give it a few weeks. When you're hungry enough, desperate enough, you'll come around. They always do. I should go, Clara said, moving toward her horse. Tom caught her arm, his grip stronger than his thin frame suggested. Think about it, Miss Monroe. Marriage to me, and all your problems disappear. The ranch gets saved, you get respectability back, everyone wins. Let go of me, Clara's voice was ice. Or what? You'll have Miles defend your honor? He already punched one man over you. How many more before people start wondering what you're giving him in return? Clara pulled the knife from her pocket, pressing it against his wrist just hard enough to draw a spot of blood. Or I'll defend myself. Now let go. Tom released her, surprise and something like respect flickering in his eyes. You've got spine. I like that. Makes things more interesting. Clara mounted her horse without assistance, looking down at him. I'm not a thing to be made interesting, Mr. Garrison. Good day. She rode away at a steady pace, refusing to show fear by galloping. But her hands shook on the reins, and her mind raced. Tom Garrison was dangerous in a way she recognized from the worst of the men who'd visited the orphanage, looking for young girls to adopt, the kind of danger that wore respectability like a mask. When she arrived back at the ranch, Miles was already there, his expression grim. Thompson can't help. His wife's sick, needs him home. Jackson wants 50% of profits, which would leave us with nothing. Then we find another way. Clara dismounted, not mentioning her encounter in town. What about doing multiple smaller drives? Take 20 head at a time? Would take too long. Each drive is a week minimum, and we don't have that kind of time. Miles took the mare's reins, noticed Clara's tension. What happened? Nothing. Town gossip, as expected. She gathered her small purchases. Miles, tell me about the Garrisons. His expression darkened immediately. Why? Because they have money, and we need options. Not that option. His voice was flat, final. Tom Garrison is poison wrapped in money. Whatever he's offering, the price is too high. You know him well? Well enough. He had his eye on a girl from town a few years back. Mexican girl, worked at the boarding house. When she wouldn't cooperate with his intentions, he made sure she couldn't find work anywhere else. Last I heard, she was working in a brothel in Denver. Clara felt a chill despite the warm morning. I see. Do you? Because if Tom Garrison is sniffing around you, you need to be careful. His father's money makes him untouchable, and he knows it. I can take care of myself. Miles stepped closer, his intensity unexpected. Can you? Because this isn't Boston, Clara. This isn't civilization with rules and protection. Out here, money is law, and the Garrisons have more than anyone. Then what do you suggest? We're running out of options. I'll find another way. But he didn't sound convinced. That evening, they worked in companionable silence, Clara preparing dinner while Miles repaired tack in the kitchen. The domesticity of it should have felt strange, but instead it felt natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. Another way. But he didn't sound convinced. That evening, they worked in companionable silence, Clara preparing dinner while Miles repaired tack in the kitchen. The domesticity of it should have felt strange, but instead it felt natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. I've been thinking, Clara said, serving the stew she'd made from their dwindling supplies. What if we didn't save the whole ranch? Miles looked up sharply. What do you mean? What if we sold part of it? The water rights to the eastern section, maybe. Keep the best grazing land in the house. Let go of the rest. That land's been in James's family for 20 years. And James is dead. The blunt statement hung between them. I'm sorry, but sentiment won't pay the bank. We need to be practical. Miles pushed his food around his plate. Who would buy partial water rights? The Garrisons might. No. The word was immediate, harsh. Miles, if it's the only way. I said no. He stood abruptly. I'd rather lose everything than owe anything to them. This isn't about owing. It's about business. Everything with the Garrisons is about owing. You give them an inch, they take everything. He moved toward the door. I need to check the horses. After he left, Clara cleaned the dishes and tried to think of alternatives. But every path led to the same conclusion. They needed money, and the Garrisons had it. The question was whether the price would be worth paying. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It was well past the hour for visitors, and Miles wouldn't knock. Clara grabbed the shotgun Miles had shown her how to use and approached cautiously. "Who is it?" "Ben Jackson, miss. I've got a proposition for Miles." Clara opened the door to find the rancher Miles had mentioned, a weather-beaten man with kind eyes. "He's in the barn. I'll fetch him." "Actually, miss, I'd like to talk to both of you. What I'm proposing involves you too." Intrigued, Clara let him in and called for Miles. When they were all seated around the kitchen table, Jackson laid out his proposal. "I've been thinking about your situation," he began. "The cattle drive won't work with just the two of us, and I can't afford to leave my place for that long anyway. But there's another option." "We're listening," Miles said cautiously. "There's going to be a horse race in 2 weeks. Big one. All the ranchers compete. The prize is $500. "I don't have a racing horse," Miles pointed out. "No, but you've got Thunder." Thunder was Miles's stallion, a magnificent black horse with Arabian bloodlines. Clara had seen him ride it, the way horse and rider moved as one. "Thunder's not trained for racing," Miles objected. "He's fast, though. Faster than anything else in the valley, I'd wager. With 2 weeks of training," Jackson trailed off suggestively. "It's gambling," Miles said. "Might lose everything." "You're already losing everything," Jackson pointed out. "At least this gives you a chance." "What does this have to do with me?" Clara asked. Jackson turned to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "The race has a peculiarity. It's not just about the horse and rider. There's a second challenge. The rider has to carry a lady's token and return it to her at the finish. It's an old tradition, meant to add romance to the event." So a lot of the betting isn't just on who wins, but on which lady gives her token. If Miles races with your token, given the attention you've been receiving, the odds will be against him. Higher odds mean bigger payout if he wins. Clara understood immediately. "You want to use the scandal to our advantage?" "Exactly." Jackson leaned forward. "I'll help train Thunder, take 20% of the winnings. You two play up the romance angle, get the whole town talking even more than they already are. When Miles wins, and he will win, Thunder's that good, you'll have enough to pay Holbrook and then some." "And if he loses?" Clara asked. "Then you're no worse off than you are now." Miles was shaking his head. "I won't use Clara that way. Won't add to what people are already saying." "What they're saying is that I'm a fallen woman," Clara said bluntly. "If that reputation can save this ranch, then I say we use it." "Clara, no, Miles, I'm practical, remember? My reputation is already ruined. Might as well get something from it." Jackson stood. "Think about it. The race is in 2 weeks. You'd need to register by Friday if you're going to compete." After he left, Miles and Clara sat in silence, the proposal hanging between them like a challenge. "I won't do it," Miles said finally. "Won't parade you around like what? A woman with choices? Because that's what I am, Miles. I choose to stay here. I choose to fight for this ranch. And I choose to use whatever weapons I have available, including the town's ridiculous assumptions about us." "You don't understand what you're agreeing to. The race is a social event. Everyone will be watching, judging. They'll expect us to act like we're together." "Then we act." Clara stood, moving closer to him. "Miles, I've been acting my whole life. Acting grateful to people who gave me crumbs. Acting demure when I wanted to scream. Acting like I believed in a future that was never going to come. This is just another performance." "But it's not just acting, is it?" His voice was rough, and something in his eyes made Clara's breath catch. "Because He stopped himself, but Clara heard what he didn't say. The attraction between them had been growing, unspoken but present. Every shared glance, every accidental touch, every moment of partnership had been building towards something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. "We do what we have to do," Clara said softly. "For the ranch." "For the ranch," Miles agreed, but his eyes said something different. The next days fell into a pattern. Miles worked with Thunder in the mornings, Jackson arriving to help with training. The horse was indeed fast, but racing required more than speed. It required stamina, response to subtle commands, the ability to navigate tight turns and obstacles. Clara watched from the fence, ostensibly to show support, but really because she was fascinated by the way Miles rode. He and Thunder moved together like water, fluid and natural. When he dismounted, sweaty and dusty from the work, something in her stomach fluttered in a way that had nothing to do with their charade. In the afternoons, they worked the ranch together. The remaining cattle needed tending, fences needed mending, the endless chores that kept a ranch barely functional. Clara learned to handle a rope, to read the weather and the movement of clouds, to tell when a cow was sick by the way it held its head. "You're taking to this," Miles observed one afternoon as they repaired a section of fence together. "It's honest work," Clara replied, driving in a nail with practiced efficiency. Clear purpose, visible results. After 20 years of mending other people's clothes and dreams, it's refreshing to build something tangible. Even if we might lose it all? Especially then, the things we might lose are the ones worth fighting for. Miles handed her another board, their fingers brushing. The touch lingered a moment too long, and they both pulled back, the pretense of their upcoming performance making every interaction loaded with meaning. That evening, a rider approached the house. Clara recognized him as one of Holbrook's men, come with a message. Miles read it, his expression darkening. "Holbrook's moving up the deadline. He wants full payment in 3 weeks, not 6. Can he do that? The contract has provisions for acceleration if he deems the loan at risk. With James dead and you here unchaperoned, he's claiming moral turpitude clauses." Clara felt rage rise in her throat. Moral turpitude? While he's suggesting I prostitute myself to him? "Welcome to frontier justice." Miles crumpled the paper. "The race is our only chance now." "Then we make sure you win." Clara stood, decision crystallizing. "Tomorrow I go to town. Register for the race. Make sure everyone knows I'll be giving you my token. The more scandal we cause, the better the odds, the bigger the payout." "Clara, no more protests, Miles. We're past the point of preserving dignity. Now we're in survival mode." The next morning, Clara dressed in her best remaining dress and rode to town with her head high. At the race registration, held at the town hall, she caused exactly the stir she'd intended. "I'd like to register Miles Rourke for the race," she told the clerk, loud enough for the gathered crowd to hear. "He'll be carrying my token." The whispers started immediately. Respectable women didn't give tokens to men they weren't engaged to. But then, respectable women didn't live unchaperoned with men who weren't their husbands. Tom Garrison appeared as if summoned by the scandal. "Well, well, making it official, are you?" "Making what official, Mr. Garrison?" "Your arrangement with Rourke. Though I wonder what happens when he loses. Will you reconsider my offer then?" "Miles won't lose." "Such confidence in a man you've known, what, a week?" Clara turned to face him fully, aware of their audience. Sometimes a week is enough to know someone's worth. Other times, a lifetime isn't enough to hide what someone truly is. The insult was clear, and Tom's face flushed. "Careful, Miss Monroe. You're making enemies you can't afford." "I already have nothing, Mr. Garrison. What more can you take?" She left before he could answer, but she felt his eyes following her. At the Mercantile, Mrs. Garrett was all false sympathy and real curiosity. "Heard you registered for the race, dear. How bold of you." "Yes," Clara agreed, selecting supplies she couldn't afford but putting them on account anyway. If they lost the race, the debt wouldn't matter. If they won, she'd pay it off. "I believe in being bold when the situation calls for it." "And does Mr. Rourke know what kind of attention this will bring? The betting alone will be significant. Some people are already saying he'll throw the race for the right price." This was new information. "Who's saying that?" "Oh, you know how people talk. But the Garrisons have been known to make it worth a man's while to lose." Clara filed this away. Another danger to watch for. "Miles has more integrity than that." "Does he? How well do you really know him, dear?" It was a good question, one Clara pondered on the ride home. She knew Miles was kind, hardworking, loyal to a fault. She knew he could read the land like a book, even if he couldn't read actual books. She knew the way his eyes crinkled when he almost smiled, the way he favored his left leg when tired, the way he talked to horses like they were people. But did she know him? Really know him? That evening, as they sat by the fire, a luxury given the warm weather, but Clara had been cold all day with nerves, she asked him directly. "Tell me about before you came here." Miles looked up from the harness he was mending. "Not much to tell." "I think there is. You know how to fight, how to handle yourself. That's not from ranch work." He was quiet for a long moment. "I was in the army, cavalry. Spent 5 years fighting Indians, protecting settlers, doing things I'm not proud of." "Is that where you hurt your leg?" "Apache arrow. Got infected, nearly killed me. Army discharged me after that. Said I wasn't fit for service anymore." His laugh was bitter. "Probably right. Hard to follow orders when you've seen what following orders leads to." "So you came here?" "Drifted for a while first, tried mining, railroad work, even rode shotgun for a stage line. Nothing fit. Then James wrote, asking for help. Said he needed someone who understood cattle." Miles set down the harness. "I think he really just needed family. Someone who wouldn't judge his failures." "And you needed that too?" "Maybe." He looked at her directly. "What about you? What are you running from?" "What makes you think I'm running?" "Because nobody comes this far unless they're running from something or toward something. And you didn't know James well enough to be running toward him." Clara considered how much truth to share. "I was running from inevitability, from a life mapped out in advance with no room for choices. Orphans who age out of the system have 3 options: factory work, domestic service, or marriage to whoever will have them. I chose a 4th option. Mail-order bride is still marriage. Yes, but marriage on my terms, or so I thought." She pulled her shawl tighter. "I thought I was choosing adventure, partnership, a chance to build something. Instead, I got—" She gestured around them. "Disappointment?" "No." The word surprised her with its certainty. "Not disappointment, something else, something unexpected, but maybe better in its own way." They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Miles spoke again. "The race, Clara. If we're doing this, really doing this, we need to make it convincing. The whole town will be watching. I know. That means we'll have to act like we're together, in public." "I know. Can you do that?" Clara stood, moving closer to him. "The question is, can you?" The challenge hung between them. Miles rose too, and suddenly the space between them seemed both too much and not enough. "We should practice," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "So it looks natural." "Practice?" "The token ceremony. You'll have to—" She swallowed hard. "Take it from me publicly. Usually it involves—" "I know what it involves." His voice was rough. "The token ceremony traditionally involved the lady pinning her token, usually a ribbon or handkerchief, to the rider's arm, sealed with a kiss for luck. It was performed in front of the crowd, a public declaration of favor. So we should make sure we can do it without looking awkward." "Right, for the charade." "For the charade," Clara agreed, but her heart was racing. Miles moved closer, close enough that she could smell the leather and soap scent of him, see the flecks of gold in his green eyes. "Clara, I need you to know something. Whatever happens at the race, whatever we have to do for show, I respect you. This doesn't change that." "I know," she said softly. "I trust you, Miles." Something shifted in his expression at the word trust. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and Clara's breath caught. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her right then. Practice. Be damned. But voices outside broke the spell. Jackson, arriving for evening strategy talk. They stepped apart. The moment shattered, but its echo remaining. Whatever they were pretending for the race was getting tangled up with something real, something neither of them was ready to name. 3 weeks, Miles said as Jackson entered. 3 weeks to save everything. Or lose everything, Clara added silently. But looking at Miles, at the determination in his eyes and the promise of something more in the way he looked at her, she thought maybe, just maybe, they had a chance at winning more than just money. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of preparation. Miles worked with Thunder from dawn to midday, the horse growing leaner and faster under the rigorous training. Clara watched when she could, telling herself she was showing support for the charade, but really she was mesmerized by the way man and horse moved together. Jackson proved invaluable, not just for training, but for intelligence. "Tom Garrison's entered the race too," he reported one evening. "Bought a thoroughbred from Denver, specifically for this." "He's that determined to win?" Clara asked. "He's that determined to beat Miles," Jackson corrected. Word is he's put $1,000 on himself to win, and he's trying to bribe the other riders to box Miles in during the race. Can we prove it? Even if we could, who'd care? His father owns half the town. Miles's jaw clenched. Let him try. Thunder can outrun anything, boxed in or not. But Clara heard the worry beneath the bravado. The race was dangerous enough without sabotage. She'd learned from Jackson that injuries were common, riders thrown, horses lamed, sometimes worse. That night, unable to sleep, she found Miles in the barn with Thunder, talking to the horse in low, soothing tones. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. Thunder's nervous, picks up on tension. He stroked the horse's neck. Or maybe I'm the nervous one. Having second thoughts? Every minute. He turned to her. Clara, if something happens, nothing will happen. But if it does, if I don't finish the race, or if Garrison finds a way to win, I want you to take Thunder and leave. Sell him if you have to. Use the money to get back east. I'm not going back east. Clara, no. She moved closer, her hand joining his on Thunder's neck. Win or lose, I'm not running. We face whatever comes together. You barely know me. I know enough. Her hand covered his. I know you're honorable. I know you work harder than any two men. I know you love James despite his flaws. I know you're fighting for this ranch, not for yourself, but because it mattered to him. That's not the only reason, Miles said quietly. No? He turned to face her fully. I'm fighting for it because you're here. Because watching you take on this challenge, seeing you refuse to give up. Clara, you make me believe impossible things might be possible. The confession hung between them, more intimate than any touch. Clara felt her heart racing, knew she should step back, maintain the fiction that this was all pretense. Instead, she stepped closer. Miles, I know, he said. I know this complicates everything. I know you came here for James, not for this, whatever this is. James is gone, Clara said softly. And I'm still here. That has to mean something. What does it mean? Before she could answer, Thunder whinnied nervously, his ears pricking toward the door. Miles immediately went on alert, pulling Clara behind him as he grabbed a pitchfork. Who's there? Tom Garrison stepped into the lamplight, flanked by two of his men. Just paying a neighborly visit. At midnight? Wanted to see the competition. Tom's eyes found Clara. And to make one last offer. We're not interested, Miles said flatly. You haven't heard it yet. Tom moved closer, his men spreading out to flank them. I'll pay off your debt to Holbrook. All of it, free and clear. In exchange for? Clara asked, though she already knew. You leave, tonight, both of you. Sign the ranch over to me and I'll give you enough money to start over somewhere else. Somewhere far from here. Why? Miles demanded. Why do you want this place so badly? Tom's smile was cold. Because you want it. Because she wants it. Because I can take it. His eyes fixed on Clara. And because I always get what I want, one way or another. Not this time, Clara said. No? You sure about that? Tom nodded to his men, who moved toward Thunder's stall. Accidents happen before races. Horses go lame, riders get hurt. Tragic, really. Miles stepped forward, the pitchfork raised. Touch my horse and I'll... You'll what? Kill me? In front of a witness? Tom's smile widened. Though I wonder how much of a witness she'd be, probably too hysterical to remember clearly. Women are like that. Clara had heard enough. She grabbed the shotgun from where it leaned against the wall, cocking it in one smooth motion. Mr. Garrison, you're trespassing. Leave. Now. You won't shoot me. Won't I? She aimed at his feet, voice steady. I'm already a fallen woman in this town's eyes. What's adding attempted murder to my reputation? Though I doubt anyone would blame me, finding 3 men in my barn at midnight. Tom studied her for a long moment, and Clara saw him recalculating. This isn't over. Yes, it is. She kept the gun steady. You'll leave now, and you'll stay away from this ranch, from Miles, and from Thunder, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you are, starting with that Mexican girl you destroyed. Tom's face went white. You don't know anything about that. I know enough, and I'm very good at writing letters. Imagine what the Denver papers might do with that story. Rich rancher's son ruins innocent girl's life. Has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Tom stepped back, motioning to his men. You've made a mistake, Miss Monroe. Both of you have. After they left, Clara's hands started shaking. Miles took the gun from her, setting it aside before pulling her into his arms. She let herself be held, let herself feel safe for just a moment. That was dangerous, he murmured into her hair. Everything about this is dangerous. Clara, he pulled back to look at her. What you said about the Mexican girl, would you really write to the papers? Yes. Fight dirty? Yes. Do whatever it takes to protect what matters? Yes. She met his eyes steadily. I told you, Miles. I don't run, and I don't lose. What if we do lose? Then we lose together. She stepped back, already missing his warmth. But we won't lose. Thunder's too fast, you're too good, and we want it too much. Want what? A chance, a future, a place to belong. She looked around the barn at Thunder, watching them with intelligent eyes, at the ranch beyond. This, all of this, together? The word was barely a whisper. Together, she confirmed, and this time it wasn't about the race or the ranch. It was about them, about the possibility growing between them like a green shoot through hard ground. Miles cupped her face in his hands, and this time there was no interruption. His lips found hers, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded. It was nothing like the chaste kisses she'd witnessed at the orphanage, nothing like what she'd imagined with James. This was fire and promise and hunger for something more than just survival. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Miles rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything. Everything was already complicated. She smiled, surprising herself. At least now it's complicated in a good way. He laughed, the sound rusty but genuine. You're not what I expected when I rode to that depot. You're not what I expected either. She stepped back, propriety reasserting itself despite the impropriety of everything else. We should sleep. Tomorrow's another day of training. Clara. He caught her hand as she turned to go. After the race, win or lose, we need to talk. About us. About what this means. After the race, she agreed. For now, we focus on winning. But as she walked back to the house, her lips still tingling from his kiss, Clara knew that something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't about saving James's ranch anymore. It wasn't about having nowhere else to go. This was about choosing to stay, choosing to fight, choosing to build something new from the ashes of old dreams. With Miles. Together. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. The week before the race passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. Clara barely slept, dividing her time between maintaining the ranch, helping Miles train Thunder, and fending off increasingly aggressive attempts by Tom Garrison to sabotage their efforts. Every morning brought new challenges, fences mysteriously cut, water troughs contaminated, threats delivered through third parties. He's trying to break us before we even get to the starting line, Miles said grimly, surveying the damage to their feed storage. Someone had set fire to it during the night, destroying what little winter feed they'd managed to store. Then we don't break, Claire replied, though exhaustion weighed on her like a physical thing. She'd been up all night keeping watch, the shotgun across her lap, jumping at every sound. Jackson said he could spare some feed if we need it. We can't keep asking for help. Pride is a luxury we can't afford right now, Miles. She touched his arm gently. Besides, Jackson's getting 20% if we win. It's in his interest to keep Thunder healthy. Miles covered her hand with his, and for a moment they stood together in the morning light, drawing strength from each other. These small touches had become their language, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing as they passed tools, standing close enough to feel each other's warmth. They hadn't kissed again since that night in the barn, but the awareness between them hummed like a telegraph wire. 3 more days, Miles said. Then this is over, one way or another. We're going to win, Clara said with more confidence than she felt. Thunder's faster than anything Garrison has, and you're the better rider. It's not just about speed. These races, they can get rough. Garrison won't play fair. Neither will we. Clara's smile had an edge to it. I've been talking to the other ranchers' wives. Seems Mr. Garrison has made enemies over the years. Several of them are hoping to see him lose. What did you do? I suggested that if they wanted to see Garrison taken down a peg, they might bet on you. Small amounts, nothing suspicious, but enough to shift the odds. The more people betting on you, the less profitable it becomes for Garrison to bribe everyone. Miles stared at her with something like awe. You're playing the whole town against him. I'm giving people who already dislike him permission to act on it. She started walking toward the house. Mrs. Patterson, whose husband lost his farm to Garrison's manipulations, is organizing a ladies' auxiliary betting pool. Officially, it's for charity, but unofficially, it's all going on you to win. Clara Monroe, Miles said, following her. You're dangerous. I told you I don't lose. That afternoon, a telegram arrived from Sister Catherine. Clara read it with shaking hands. No funds available. Orphanage struggling. But sending prayers and reminder, David defeated Goliath with faith and good aim. Your devoted sister, C. No money, but the message was clear. Fight smart, not hard. Bad news, Miles asked, seeing her expression. Just confirmation of what we already knew. We're on our own. She folded the telegram carefully. Miles, I need to go to town tomorrow. There are things we need for the race. I'll come with you. No, you need to keep training. And besides, I need to do this alone. He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Be careful. I'm always careful. The next morning, Clara dressed in her best remaining dress, pinned her hair severely, and rode to town with a specific purpose. Her first stop was the bank. Holbrook kept her waiting for an hour, a petty power play that only strengthened her resolve. Miss Monroe, he said when she was finally admitted to his office. Come to beg for more time? Come to make you an offer. She sat without invitation. You're going to lose money on this loan. I beg your pardon? If you foreclose, you'll have a ranch you can't sell. The Garrisons won't buy it. They're waiting for it to go to auction where they can get it cheaper. No one else has the money. You'll be sitting on dead property for years. Your point? My point is that if Miles wins the race, we can pay you a substantial portion of what's owed. Not all, but enough to make it worth extending the loan another 6 months. Holbrook leaned back, studying her. And if he loses? Then you're no worse off than you are now. I could have Tom Garrison's assurance of purchase. No, you couldn't. Clara played her ace. Because Tom Garrison is about to have bigger problems than acquiring land. Oh? She pulled out a letter, one she'd spent all night writing. This is addressed to the Denver Post. It details Mr. Garrison's involvement in the destruction of a young woman's reputation and life. Names, dates, witnesses who are finally willing to talk. If it's mailed, his father will cut him off to save the family name. You're threatening the Garrisons. I'm presenting facts that might become public if circumstances require it. She stood. Think about it, Mr. Holbrook. A partial payment and continued interest, or a foreclosure that gains you nothing but a property you can't move. You're a businessman. Do the math. She left before he could respond, her heart pounding. The letter was real, the threats genuine, but would it be enough? Her next stop was the Mercantile, where she found Mrs. Garrett serving several ranch wives. The conversation stopped when she entered. Ladies, Clara said calmly. Mrs. Garrett? We were just discussing the race, Mrs. Patterson said, her tone pointed, and the disgraceful behavior of certain parties. Yes, Clara agreed. Tom Garrison's attempts at sabotage are quite disgraceful. The women exchanged glances. This wasn't the response they'd expected. Though I suppose, Clara continued, selecting items from the shelves, desperate men do desperate things when they're about to lose. I almost feel sorry for him. Sorry? Mrs. Garrett couldn't help asking. Well, yes. Imagine being so insecure that you have to buy victory because you can't earn it. His father must be so disappointed. His father doesn't know about his activities, Mrs. Patterson said slowly. Doesn't he? Clara turned to face them fully. How strange. You'd think someone would have told him by now about the bribes, the threats, that poor Mexican girl. She let the words hang. But then, who would dare cross the Garrisons? Someone might, Mrs. Patterson said, her eyes gleaming, if they thought others would support them. Hypothetically speaking, Clara said, if someone were to inform Mr. Garrison Sr. about his son's behavior, and if multiple people confirmed it, well, I imagine Tom might find himself suddenly recalled to Denver or cut off financially. The women absorbed this in silence. Then Mrs. Patterson smiled, a sharp expression that transformed her plain face. You know, I've been meaning to pay a call on Mrs. Garrison. We serve on the church committee together. How nice, Clara said mildly. Do give her my regards. She left with her purchases, knowing she'd lit a fuse. Whether it would burn fast enough to matter remained to be seen. That evening, she found Miles working Thunder through racing patterns Jackson had marked out. The horse was magnificent, all controlled power and eager energy. But it was Miles who drew her eye. The way he moved with the horse, the quiet confidence in his hands, the focus in his expression. How did town go? He asked when he finally noticed her watching. Productively. She climbed the fence to sit on the top rail. Miles, whatever happens at the race, I want you to know something. What? These past weeks, despite everything, James dying, the ranch failing, Garrison's threats, they've been some of the best of my life. He rode Thunder over to where she sat, reaching up to take her hand. Clara. No, let me finish. I came here expecting one kind of life and found another. Found you. And even if we lose everything tomorrow, I won't regret it. We're not going to lose. But if we do, we won't. His grip tightened on her hand. I've lost too much of my life already. I'm not losing this. Not the ranch, not the race, and not you. The intensity in his voice made her breath catch. Miles, I love you. The words came out rough, unplanned. I know it's too soon. I know you came here for James. I know we barely know each other. But Clara, I love you. Your strength, your cleverness, the way you fight for what matters. I love all of it. Clara slid down from the fence, standing close enough to touch but not touching. It's not too soon, she said softly. Not when you know. And I know, Miles. I love you too. He dismounted in one fluid motion, and then she was in his arms, his mouth on hers, and the world narrowed to just this. The two of them, the setting sun, and the promise of something worth fighting for. When they broke apart, Miles rested his forehead against hers. After tomorrow, we'll have time to figure it all out, Clara finished. But Miles, I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't let Garrison make you angry during the race. He'll try to provoke you, make you reckless. Promise me you'll keep your head. I promise. He kissed her again, softer this time. Though you should know it's not Garrison who makes me reckless. She laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. Save the sweet talk for after you win. You're that confident? I'm confident in you, in Thunder, in us. She stepped back, already missing his warmth. Now go rest. Tomorrow's a big day. But neither of them slept well that night. Clara lay awake listening to every sound, half expecting another sabotage attempt. Around midnight, she heard Miles moving downstairs and joined him in the kitchen. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. Keep thinking about everything that could go wrong. Then think about everything that could go right instead. She moved to the stove, heating water for tea. This time tomorrow, we could be celebrating. The ranch saved, Garrison defeated, our future secure. Our future? She turned to face him. Unless you were planning to drift on after this? No. The word was immediate, certain. My drifting days are over. Question is, are you staying? Where else would I go? This is home now. Even though it's not what you planned, even though James is gone, Clara said gently, and I'll always be grateful to him for bringing me here, even if it wasn't the way either of us expected. But Miles, what's between us isn't about James anymore. It's about us. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. Marry me. The words hung in the air between them. Clara pulled back to see his face. What? After the race, win or lose, marry me. Not for the ranch, not for propriety, not for any reason except that I love you and want to build a life with you. Miles, I know it's fast, I know we should wait, court properly, but Clara, we've been through more in 3 weeks than most couples see in years. I know who you are, you know who I am. Why wait? She thought about all the reasons to say no, the gossip it would cause, the assumptions people would make, the speed of it all. Then she thought about waking up next to Miles for the rest of her life, building the ranch together, facing whatever came as partners. Yes, she said simply. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. After the race, win or lose. She smiled through tears she hadn't realized were falling, though I'd prefer if we won. He kissed her then, deep and sure, and for a moment they let themselves imagine a future where the race was won, the ranch was saved, and they could build something beautiful together. A crash from outside shattered the moment. Miles grabbed the shotgun while Clara picked up a lantern. They found the barn door broken open and Thunder's stall empty. No, Miles breathed, real fear in his voice for the first time Clara had known him. They ran outside, Clara holding the lantern high. In its light, they could see Thunder in the corral, but he wasn't alone. Tom Garrison was there with a whip, trying to drive the horse toward the open gate where his men waited with ropes. Get away from my horse, Miles roared, vaulting the fence. Tom turned, the whip still in his hand. Just admiring the competition. At 2 a.m? Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd see what I'm up against. Tom's smile was cruel. He's fast, I'll give you that. Be a shame if something happened to him. The only thing that's going to happen is you leaving. Now. Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of witnesses? Tom gestured to his men. I don't think so. Clara had heard enough. She climbed through the fence, the lantern still in her hand, and walked straight toward Tom. Mr. Garrison, you're done. Excuse me? I said you're done. Your father will be receiving some interesting information tomorrow morning about your activities, your debts, your indiscretions. Several prominent citizens have agreed to share their experiences with him. Tom's face went pale. You're bluffing. Mrs. Patterson's husband lost his farm to your manipulations. Mr. Chen from the laundry has records of your gambling debts. Maria, the girl you ruined, she wrote a letter before she left town. I have a copy. Clara stepped closer. Your father values the family reputation above all else. What do you think he'll do when he learns what you've been doing to it? You wouldn't dare. I've already dared. The letters will be delivered unless you leave right now and stay away from this ranch, from Miles, and from the race tomorrow. Tom raised the whip, and for a moment Clara thought he might strike her. Then Miles was there, catching Tom's wrist, twisting until the whip fell. Touch her and I'll kill you, Miles said, his voice deadly calm. Witnesses or no witnesses. Tom jerked free, backing toward his men. This isn't over. Yes, it is, Clara said, because if you interfere with the race tomorrow, if you so much as look at Thunder wrong, your father learns everything. And if you somehow hurt Miles or Thunder anyway, then the Denver papers get the story. Your choice, Mr. Garrison, lose a race or lose everything. Tom stood frozen for a long moment, calculation clear on his face. Then he turned and strode toward his horse. You've made an enemy today. I made an enemy the day I refused to be bought, Claire replied. Today, I just acknowledged it. After they left, Miles checked Thunder thoroughly, running his hands over every inch of the horse, checking for injuries. He's okay, he said finally, relief clear in his voice. We need to watch him for the rest of the night, Clara said. I'll stay with him. We'll stay with him. They spent the remaining hours until dawn in the barn, taking turns dozing while the other kept watch. Thunder seemed to understand something important was happening, standing alert, occasionally nuzzling Miles's shoulder as if offering reassurance. As the sun rose on race day, Jackson arrived with coffee and news. Whole town's buzzing. Apparently Tom Garrison got called to a family meeting last night. His father's furious about something. Good, Clara said, accepting the coffee gratefully. Also heard Holbrook's going to be at the race. Unusual for him. Jackson's eyes were knowing. Someone light a fire under him too? Several someones, I think, Clara said innocently. Jackson laughed. Girl, you've turned this whole town upside down in 3 weeks. The town was already sideways. I just shook it a little. They prepared for the race methodically. Thunder was groomed until his coat gleamed like black silk. Miles dressed in his best clothes, not fancy, but clean and well-fitted. Clara wore her blue dress, the one that brought out her eyes, and pinned her hair up with extra care. You're beautiful, Miles said when he saw her. You're biased. Completely. He kissed her quickly. For luck. I thought that came later with the token ceremony. Can't have too much luck. The ride to town felt both eternal and too quick. The streets were packed with people, the race being the biggest event of the season. Clara saw familiar faces, some friendly, many hostile, all curious. She kept her head high, her hand resting on Miles's arm as they walked Thunder through the crowd. The other riders were already gathered, 8 in total, including Tom Garrison on his expensive Denver thoroughbred. Tom's face was set in hard lines, his usual swagger diminished. Whatever his father had said to him had hit home. "Riders!" The race marshal, an elderly rancher named Hobson, called out, "Present your tokens!" This was the moment Clara had been dreading and anticipating. She stepped forward with Miles, aware of every eye on them. From her pocket she drew a blue ribbon, the same color as her dress. Her hands were steady as she pinned it to Miles's arm, though her heart raced. "For luck," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I don't need luck," Miles replied, just as clearly. "I have you." Then he kissed her, properly and thoroughly, right there in front of the whole town. The crowd reacted with gasps, cheers, and scandalized whispers, but Clara didn't care. Let them talk. After today, either they'd have won and the talk wouldn't matter, or they'd have lost and they'd be leaving anyway. When they broke apart, she saw Holbrook watching from the banker's box, his expression calculating. Mrs. Patterson and her ladies' auxiliary were clustered together, money changing hands as last-minute bets were placed. Even Tom's father, the elder Mr. Garrison, was present, his face stern as he watched his son. "Riders, mount up," Hobson called. Miles swung onto Thunder with easy grace. The horse pranced, eager to run. "Stay by the finish line," Miles told Clara. "I want to see you when I win." "When you win," she agreed, no doubt in her voice. The racecourse was a 5-mile loop outside town, marked by flags. The riders would leave from Main Street, circle through the ranch lands, and return to town for the finish. It was rough terrain, hills, streams, rocky passages that could lame a horse if taken wrong. Clara took her position near the finish line, surrounded by the other women who'd given tokens. Some acknowledged her with small nods, others pointedly ignored her. She didn't care. Her entire focus was on Miles and Thunder at the starting line. "Ready!" Hobson raised his pistol. "Set!" The crack of the gun was immediately drowned by the thunder of hooves as 9 horses exploded from the starting line. Thunder shot forward like his nameplate, Miles low over his neck, the blue ribbon visible even from a distance. The crowd surged toward various viewpoints, but Clara stayed put. She could track the race's progress by the dust cloud and the shouts of spectators positioned along the route. 5 minutes passed. 10. 15. "They're coming back," someone shouted. "Garrison's in the lead." Clara's heart sank, but then another voice, "No, wait, someone's coming up fast on the outside." The crowd pressed forward, and Clara had to fight to maintain her position. She could hear the horses now, the pound of hooves growing louder. Then they burst into view, Tom Garrison on his thoroughbred, another rider she didn't know, and Miles on Thunder, gaining with every stride. "Come on," Clara whispered, her hands clenched so tight her nails dug into her palms. "Come on, Miles." Tom glanced back, saw Miles closing, and did something with his crop that made his horse veer sideways, trying to block Thunder's path. But Miles had expected it, pulling Thunder to the outside, losing ground but avoiding collision. They had a quarter-mile to go. Tom's horse was tiring, she could see it in the labor of its stride. Thunder, trained on ranch land used to rough terrain, seemed to find another gear. The gap closed. 3 lengths, 2, 1. They were neck and neck with 100 yards to go. The crowd was screaming. Clara found herself shouting Miles's name, dignity forgotten. Tom used his crop viciously, his horse responding with a burst of speed. But Thunder, magnificent Thunder, stretched out his neck and simply ran like he was born to it. They crossed the finish line with Thunder ahead by half a length. The crowd exploded. Clara ran toward Miles as he slowed Thunder, turning the horse back. He dismounted just in time to catch her as she threw herself into his arms, both of them laughing and crying at once. "You did it!" she gasped. "You won!" "We won," he corrected, spinning her around. "We won, Clara." Tom Garrison threw his crop down in disgust, his father already approaching with a face like thunder. Holbrook was making his way through the crowd, and Clara could see him calculating, reassessing. $500, Jackson whooped, appearing with the race marshal. plus my betting winnings minus my 20%. Miles, you've got enough to save the ranch. Miss Monroe, Holbrook said, finally reaching them. Mr. Rourke, perhaps we should discuss terms. Perhaps we should, Clara agreed, not letting go of Miles's hand. They met an hour later in Holbrook's office. Clara, Miles, and surprisingly, the elder Mr. Garrison. I understand, Garrison Sr. said coldly, that you've come into possession of certain information about my son. Information that several citizens were eager to share, Clara said carefully, though they've agreed to remain quiet if Tom causes no more trouble. I see. The older man's jaw tightened. Tom is being sent to our Denver operations, immediately. He won't trouble you again. Thank you, Miles said. Garrison stood to leave, then paused. You ran a good race, Rourke. Your horse has heart. He does, Miles agreed. After Garrison left, Holbrook spread papers on his desk. With your winnings and what Jackson tells me various ladies won on side bets they're contributing, you can pay $600 toward the debt. I'm prepared to extend the loan for the remainder, with regular payments over 2 years. At what interest? Clara asked. Standard rates? Half standard rates, Clara countered, since we're paying over half the principal today. Holbrook's eye twitched, but he nodded. Acceptable. They signed the papers, and just like that, the ranch was saved. Not secure. They'd still have to work hard, make payments, build the business, but saved from immediate foreclosure. Outside the bank, Miles pulled Clara into the alley between buildings, kissing her until she was breathless. We did it, he said against her mouth. We did. She pulled back to look at him. What now? Now we go home. Our home. He grinned. And tomorrow we get married. Tomorrow? Unless you've changed your mind. Never. She kissed him again. But Miles, people will talk. They'll say I'm marrying you for the ranch, or you're marrying me for propriety. Let them talk. He cupped her face in his hands. We know the truth. We're marrying for love. Everything else is just details. They rode home together on Thunder, Clara sitting in front of Miles this time by choice rather than necessity, his arms around her as they held the reins together. The ranch looked different somehow as they approached, still weathered, still struggling, but theirs now, really theirs. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains purple just as James had described in his letters, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. She'd traveled 2,000 miles expecting one life and finding another. She'd lost the future she'd planned, but gained one she'd never dared dream of. What are you thinking? Miles asked, his arm around her shoulders. About James. About how different this all turned out from what he imagined. Do you think he'd be happy? With us, I mean? Clara considered. I think he'd be happy we saved the ranch. Happy that two people he brought together found love, even if it wasn't the way he intended. She leaned into Miles's warmth. He was a dreamer. He'd appreciate the poetry of it. The poetry of what? Of a mail-order bride who came west for one man but found her heart with another. Of a drifter who stopped drifting because he found home. Of a failing ranch saved by a horse race and sheer stubbornness. Miles laughed. When you put it that way, it does sound like something out of one of his books. Except this is real. Clara turned in his arms. This is our real life, Miles. Our ranch, our future, our love. Our wedding tomorrow, he added with a grin. That too. She kissed him softly. Though we should probably tell Jackson and get the preacher. Already done. Jackson arranged it while we were at the bank. Apparently the whole town's expecting it. Of course they are. But Clara found she didn't mind. Let the town have their scandal-turned-romance. She had everything she wanted, a home, a purpose, and a man who loved her for exactly who she was. As the stars came out, brilliant in the clear Wyoming sky, Clara thought she heard the coyotes howling in the distance. But this time, it didn't sound lonely at all. It sounded like wildness calling to wildness, like the land itself celebrating. Tomorrow she would marry Miles Rourke in a simple ceremony with Jackson as witness and half the town watching in curiosity. Tomorrow they would begin the hard work of building the ranch into something sustainable. Tomorrow they would start their real life together. But tonight, sitting on the porch of their saved ranch with Miles's arms around her and Thunder grazing peacefully in the corral, Clara Monroe finally understood what it meant to be home. The next morning dawned clear and bright, as if the weather itself had decided to bless their union. Clara woke in her small room for the last time as an unmarried woman, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch stirring to life. She could hear Miles moving around downstairs, probably making coffee with his usual morning gruffness that she'd learned to find endearing. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Clara?" It was Mrs. Patterson, of all people. "May I come in?" Clara opened the door to find not just Mrs. Patterson, but 3 other women from town, all carrying packages. "We thought," Mrs. Patterson said with something approaching kindness, "that you might need help preparing for your wedding." Clara stood frozen in surprise as the women filed into her small room, their arms laden with packages and mysterious bundles. Mrs. Patterson set down a white dress wrapped in tissue paper, while Mrs. Chen, the laundry owner's wife, produced a delicate veil that looked like spun moonlight. "We know you haven't had time to prepare properly," Mrs. Patterson said, her usual stern expression softening. "And whatever we might have thought before, well, seeing you fight for this ranch, seeing how Miles looks at you, we were wrong to judge so harshly." "I don't know what to say," Clara managed, genuinely moved. "Say you'll wear this," Mrs. Thompson said, unwrapping the dress. It wasn't new, but it was beautiful. Ivory silk with pearl buttons, obviously cherished and carefully preserved. "It was my mother's. She came west as a bride too, though under happier circumstances than yours." Clara touched the fabric gently, tears pricking her eyes. "It's beautiful, but I couldn't—" "You can, and you will," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "Consider it the town's apology for how we treated you, and perhaps," she added with a slight smile, "our thanks for dealing with Tom Garrison. That boy has been a plague on this valley for too long." As the women helped her dress, fixing her hair and pinning the veil, Clara felt something shift. These women who had shunned her were now fussing over her like mother hens, sharing their own stories of coming west, of marriages that started in hardship but grew into love. "My husband and I couldn't stand each other when we first married," Mrs. Chen confided, adjusting Clara's veil. "Our families arranged it. But working side by side, facing troubles together, it changes you, makes you see what really matters." "Miles is a good man," Mrs. Thompson added. "Quiet, keeps to himself, but good through and through. James never appreciated what he had in that cousin of his." "James was a dreamer," Clara said softly. "There's value in that too." "Perhaps," Mrs. Patterson agreed, "but dreamers need practical people to keep them grounded. Miles has that in you now." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Clara?" It was Miles's voice, uncertain. "Jackson says I'm not supposed to see you before the ceremony, but I wanted to make sure you hadn't changed your mind and run off." The women laughed, and Clara called back, "Where would I run to? You and Thunder are the only ones who know how to get anywhere from here." "Fair point," he said through the door, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "I'll see you at the church then?" "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." "Just wild cowboys?" "Especially not those." After he left, the women finished their preparations. When Clara finally looked in the small mirror, she barely recognized herself. The dress fit as if it had been made for her. The veil softened her features, and her eyes sparkled with happiness she'd never thought to feel. "You're ready," Mrs. Patterson declared. "Now, let's get you married before that man wears a groove in the church floor with his pacing." The ride to town was surreal. Clara sat in Mrs. Patterson's wagon, surrounded by women who just days ago had treated her like a pariah. Now they were discussing recipes for feeding hungry ranch hands and tips for keeping a house in the dusty Wyoming climate. The church was fuller than Clara had expected. It seemed half the town had turned out, whether from genuine goodwill or curiosity she didn't know and didn't care. What mattered was Miles, standing at the altar in his one good suit, Jackson beside him as best man, looking at her like she was the answer to every prayer he'd never known to pray. The ceremony itself was simple. The preacher, a young man who seemed nervous about the attention, spoke about love forged in adversity, about partnerships built on mutual respect, about the courage to choose love even when the path wasn't clear. Clara barely heard the words, lost in Miles's eyes, in the way his hands trembled slightly as he slipped a simple gold band on her finger, James's father's ring, he told her quietly, one of the few valuable things left from the family. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said, relief clear in his voice that he'd gotten through without stumbling. "You may kiss the bride." This kiss was different from their others, public, official, a declaration before God and the town that they belonged to each other. The church erupted in cheers and some good-natured ribbing, but Clara heard none of it. Her world had narrowed to Miles's lips on hers and the gold band on her finger that made it all real. The reception was held at the ranch, hastily organized by Jackson and the Reformed Ladies' Auxiliary. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food the women had prepared. Musicians from town played fiddle and guitar, and couples danced on a makeshift floor of wooden planks laid over the grass. Not quite the grand affair James probably imagined for his bride, Miles said as they watched their guests enjoy themselves. "It's perfect," Clara replied, meaning it. "It's honest and real, just like us." Holbrook approached them during a lull in the dancing, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Rourke," he said, and Clara felt a thrill at her new name. "Mr. Rourke, I wanted to offer my congratulations and this." He handed Miles an envelope. Inside was a document reducing their interest rate even further. "Call it a wedding present," Holbrook said dryly, "and perhaps an investment in the future. I have a feeling this ranch is going to thrive under your management." "Thank you," Miles said, genuine surprise in his voice. "Don't thank me. Thank your wife. She reminded me that sometimes the best business decision isn't the obvious one." Holbrook tipped his hat to Clara. "You've got a formidable partner there, Rourke. Don't forget it." As the sun began to set, casting golden light over the celebration, Clara found herself standing with Miles at the edge of the gathering, watching their guests. Jackson was regaling a group with the story of the race, embellishing with each telling. The women were gossiping happily, the men discussing cattle prices and weather predictions. "No regrets?" Miles asked, his arm around her waist. "None," Clara said firmly. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be." "Even though it's not what you planned?" "Especially because it's not what I planned. The best things in life rarely are." Old Mr. Garrison approached them then, his expression stern. Clara tensed, but the elderly man simply extended his hand to Miles. "I wanted to apologize for my son's behavior. Tom has disappointed me greatly. He's been sent to Denver permanently." "We appreciate that, sir," Miles said, shaking his hand. Garrison turned to Clara. "You're a brave woman, Mrs. Rourke. Not many would have stood up to Tom the way you did." "I had good reason to," Clara replied evenly. "Yes, well," Garrison cleared his throat. "I also wanted to make you a business proposition. I'm looking for reliable suppliers for my cattle operations in Denver. If you can provide quality beef at competitive prices, I'd be interested in a contract." Clara and Miles exchanged glances. A contract with Garrison would mean steady income, security for the ranch's future. "We'd be interested in discussing terms," Clara said carefully. "Good. I'll send my man around next week." Garrison tipped his hat. "Congratulations on your marriage. I have a feeling it will be a successful partnership." After he left, Miles turned to Clara in amazement. "Did we just go from near bankruptcy to a potential contract with the biggest cattle operation in the territory?" "It appears so," Clara said, equally stunned, "though we'll read every word of that contract twice before signing." "3 times," Miles agreed. Then he grinned. "Dance with me, wife." They joined the other couples on the makeshift dance floor, moving together to the fiddle's sweet melody. Clara had learned many things in her weeks at the ranch, but dancing with Miles was something that came naturally, their bodies finding a rhythm as easily as they'd found love. "I have something for you," Miles said as they swayed together. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have something that was just yours." Clara unfolded it to find a deed transfer. "Miles, what is this?" "I'm putting half the ranch in your name. Equal partners in everything, including the land." "But can you do that? Legally?" "Jackson's brother is a lawyer. He drew it up this morning. All it needs is your signature." Miles cupped her face gently. This ranch is as much yours as mine, Clara. You've earned it with your sweat and cleverness and courage. I want the paper to reflect that. Clara kissed him right there on the dance floor, not caring who saw. You wonderful, impossible man. Is that a yes? It's a yes to everything. To the ranch, to the contract, to the life we're building together. As the celebration continued around them, Clara thought about the strange path that had brought her here. She'd answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride, traveled across the country to marry a stranger, only to find him dying and herself stranded. She'd been scorned, threatened, nearly ruined, but she'd also found strength she didn't know she possessed, a community that eventually embraced her, and a love deeper than anything she'd imagined possible. The party wound down as full dark approached. Guests began departing with well wishes and knowing smiles. Jackson was the last to leave, pressing a bottle of good whiskey into Miles's hands with a wink. For later, he said, though I suspect you two won't need any help celebrating. Finally, Clara and Miles were alone at their ranch, truly theirs now, saved from foreclosure, blessed with new opportunities, and most importantly, shared between two people who'd chosen each other against all odds. They stood on the porch, arms around each other, watching the stars emerge in the clear Wyoming sky. Thunder nickered from the corral, and somewhere in the distance those familiar coyotes howled their nightly song. What are you thinking? Miles asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. I'm thinking about James, Claire admitted, wondering if he knew somehow that this would happen, that bringing me here would save not just the ranch but both of us. Maybe he did. He always said things worked out the way they were meant to, even if it wasn't the way we planned. He was right about that, at least. Clara turned in Miles's arms. Take me to bed, husband. With pleasure, wife. Their wedding night was tender and passionate by turns, two people who'd been circling each other finally coming together without pretense or hesitation. Clara discovered that Miles, so controlled and steady in daily life, could be wonderfully unguarded in private moments. And Miles learned that Clara's practical exterior hid depths of passion that matched his own. Later, as they lay entwined in the bed that would now be theirs to share, Miles traced lazy patterns on Clara's bare shoulder. Tell me about the future, he said. What do you see for us? Clara considered, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I see us building this ranch into something James would be proud of. Not his grand vision, but something sustainable and real. I see children eventually, tough little cowboys and cowgirls who know how to work hard and dream big. I see us growing old together, sitting on that porch, still arguing about the best way to fix fences. Arguing? Miles laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. Is that what we do? Discussing firmly, Clara amended, with passionate conviction. I like your vision, Miles said, though you left out the part where we become the most successful ranch in Wyoming. I was trying to be realistic. Why start now? He rolled them so he was above her, his eyes serious despite his teasing tone. Clara, you took an impossible situation and turned it into this, into us. I think we can afford to dream a little bigger. All right then, Clara said, pulling him down for a kiss. We'll be the most successful ranch in Wyoming, with the fastest horses, the best cattle, and the most scandalous love story the territory has ever seen. Now you're talking. The next weeks fell into a rhythm of hard work and quiet contentment. They rose before dawn to tend the animals, worked through the heat of the day on repairs and improvements, and fell into bed exhausted but satisfied each night. The contract with Garrison came through as promised. Fair terms, steady income, enough to not just meet their loan payments but to start making real improvements to the ranch. Clara proved to have a genius for the business side of ranching. She negotiated with suppliers, managed the books with ruthless efficiency, and somehow convinced 3 of Jackson's cousins to work for them in exchange for room, board, and a small wage. Miles handled the cattle, the horses, and the physical demands of the ranch with a competence that grew more apparent now that he wasn't constantly fighting James's impractical schemes. One morning, about a month after their wedding, Clara woke feeling queasy. She barely made it to the chamber pot before losing the contents of her stomach. Clara? Miles was immediately beside her, worry clear in his voice. What's wrong? Are you ill? She sat back, a suspicion forming. What's the date? The 15th. Why? Clara did quick calculations, her eyes widening. Miles, I think I might be with child. He stared at her, his expression cycling through surprise, joy, and terror in quick succession. A baby? Already? Well, we have been rather enthusiastic in our marital activities, Clara said dryly. Miles pulled her into his arms, careful as if she might break. A baby. Our baby. It's not certain yet, but if my calculations are correct, she smiled against his shoulder. Spring. The baby would come in spring. Spring, Miles repeated, wonder in his voice. New life when everything else is coming alive too. The pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor a week later, and news spread through the town like wildfire. The same women who'd once shunned Clara now visited regularly with advice, remedies for morning sickness, and tiny knitted things for the baby. Funny how a wedding ring and a baby change everything, Clara observed one evening after Mrs. Patterson had left, having delivered enough food to feed them for a week. It's not just that, Miles said, his hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. It's you. You've changed this whole town, made them see things differently. I simply refused to be what they expected, either a victim or a villain. It confused them into acceptance. Fall arrived with its crisp mornings and golden afternoons.